And welcome back to Hannity. So another one of Bill Clinton's scandals from his troubled presidency is coming back to haunt Hillary Clinton's run for the White House. In an article for the New York Post, author Peter Schweizer exposes how the Clintons have benefited from Bill's infamous presidential pardon of international fugitive Marc Rich. This was back in 2001. Now, Schweizer writes, quote, "But while the pardon was a political mistake, it certainly was not a financial one. In the years following the scandal, the flow of funds from those connected to Marc or the pardon scandal have continued to help the Clintons, and Rich died in 2013, but his business partners, lawyers, advisors, and friends have showered millions of dollars on the Clintons in the decade and a half following the scandal." Here with reaction, author of Clinton Cash, the president of the Government Accountability Institute, Breitbart senior editor-at-large, Peter Schweizer is back. You know, and this never ends. You talked a lot about the money coming in from countries that have atrocious human rights records and women's rights records. And here you have the pardon of Marc Rich. They benefited big time financially. Explain this.
Yeah, that's right, Sean. I mean, if you remember the Marc Rich scandal, Marc Rich was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Bill Clinton, on his last day in office, pardons him. A lot of people are shocked and surprised, including his political allies. And what an investigation found out after the fact was that in the run-up to that pardon, Denise Rich, Marc Rich's ex-wife, had written large checks to the Clinton Foundation and to the Democratic Party. What we found in researching the donations since that pardon is that the flow of cash of people connected to Marc Rich has continued.
By the way,
so while, as you pointed out, Bill Clinton has said this was a political mistake, it certainly has not been a financial one. They've reaped a lot of financial rewards because of what they did for Marc Rich.
Now, this is a guy, by the way, who traded illegally with America's enemies, including the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran, and he brought, what, about $200 million worth of oil, while revolutionaries allied with Khomeini had American hostages. You know, this is not a good guy. This is a guy that was apparently a lot of his wealth, you know, selling oil to the apartheid regime in South Africa. Now, we reached out to the Clinton Foundation. Interestingly, Peter, they didn't respond to us. Why?
Yeah, big surprise. No, you're exactly right. I mean, Marc Rich was a bad dude. And by the way, all the things that you mentioned about him trading with the Khomeini, with North Korea, with the Soviets, with the apartheid regime, South Africa, even after the 2001 pardon, it came out after that fact that he was continuing in his bad ways. He was implicated in the oil for food scandal involving the Iraqi government and Saddam Hussein. So it's not like this was a guy who was repentant for what he had done. And yet the Clintons have taken a $1 billion pledge from Marc Rich's longtime business partner. They've taken money from his lawyers. They've taken money from all sorts of people directly connected to Marc Rich. And it just indicates they're pretty much willing to take money from anybody.
How much money are we talking about?
You know, it's hard to say because they reveal the contributions in ranges, but it is certainly more than $10 million. There's a $1 billion with a B dollar pledge that Gilbert Chagoury, Marc Rich's longtime business partner, has made. We don't know how much of that has been honored, but it's a large sum of money. And by the way, Sean, as I point out in the piece, there are still more than 1,000 contributors to the Clinton Foundation that have never been disclosed. Those are people basically from the natural resources industry, which is commodities and mining. That was Marc Rich's industry. So the possibility that there's more is certainly out there.
Is it fair to say that countries with atrocious human rights records like Saudi Arabia and all these other countries that donated to the Clinton Foundation bought Hillary's silence, and that in this case there was a sort of like a wink and a nod, a quid pro quo, you get your pardon, we expect your help later?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I get asked this a lot. How does the Clinton business model work? And I basically think there are two ways. One is basically payment for services rendered, right? A pardon takes place, we're going to take care of you. I think the other arrangement the Clintons have is kind of a retainer arrangement, right? We'll continue to provide you with funds. We may not need you to do something right now. We may need you to do something later. So both of those are definitely in play and involve some really, really bad people.
All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Peter. When we come back.